fast you were going?
What? How fast you were going?
I don't know. 10?
8.
Welcome to another episode of MOTORCOP Chronicles podcast. I'm your host, the Iceman. Apologize. It's the end of our watch episode. I try to put out on the first. I do know I'm 3 days late on that. But we're going to get started. We did have some good news. We don't have as many this month as we had last month, which is good news. Bad news is we still got too many. One is too many for anybody. There was 20 deaths reported in the month of March, which is 8 less than February. Don't hear me sniffle or anything like that. It is pollen season, yellow season, and unfortunately, I suffer from allergies pretty bad. So if I do sniffle or whatever, I apologize now ahead of time. But let's go ahead and read off the names and give a little respect and honor to the men and women that gave their lives while serving the public. All right, we're going to start off with Lieutenant Scott Brandon Owens from the Union City Police Department in Oklahoma. His end of watch was Tuesday, March the 1st. Cause of death was COVID-19. He was 39 years old. He had 8 years on the job, and he was a military veteran. He is survived by his wife and 2 children. We have Senior Police Officer Robert Duran from the Santa Fe Police Department in New Mexico. His end of watch was Wednesday, March the 2nd. He died during a vehicle pursuit. He was 43 years old. He had 7 years on the job. He was killed in a vehicle crash while pursuing who was initially believed to be a carjacking suspect on I-25 south of Old Paso Trail exit. Officers responding to the initial call of a carjacking and abduction located the vehicle near the intersection of Sawmill Road and St. Francis Drive. The driver led officers on a pursuit that went onto the interstate. As the vehicle continued to flee southbound, it crossed the median and continued driving southbound in the northbound lanes until colliding with an oncoming car. 2 patrol cars were also involved in this crash. Officer Duran and a retired firefighter driving the other vehicle were killed in the crash. The driver of the fleeing vehicle and another officer were injured. It was later determined that the woman driving had made up the story and had told the unwitting 911 caller she was being abducted. Further investigation that the woman had been charged with making a similarly false report 6 months prior. Following the crash, she was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and numerous other felonies. Officer Duran had served with the Santa Fe Police Department for 7 years and was assigned to patrol section and the emergency response team. He is survived by his wife and 2 sons. Family lost their husband because some woman has mental issues, making up stuff. Next we have Trooper Tamar Bucci, if I'm saying the last name correctly. Massachusetts State Police. End of watch was Thursday, March the 3rd. Cause of death was an automobile crash. She was killed. She was 34 years old. She had 2 years on the job. She was killed in a vehicle crash when her patrol SUV was struck by a tractor trailer near exit 27. She had activated her emergency lights and was moving to the side of the road to assist a stopped motorist when the crash occurred. Her patrol car was pushed against a cliff face as a result of the collision. Two passerbyers pulled her from the wreckage, and a Stoneham police officer began life-saving efforts. However, she succumbed to her injuries at the Massachusetts General Hospital. Trooper Bucci had served with the Massachusetts State Police for 2 years. She is survived by her parents, sister, stepbrother, and stepsister. We've had incidents here recently also. One of the deputies I work with has had back surgery and stuff due for an 18-wheeler running into the back of them with a broke down vehicle on the interstate with their lights on. People really need to pay a lot more attention. It's unfortunate that people had to lose their lives because of it. Deputy First Class Kenny Orlander, Frederick County Sheriff's Office. His end of watch was Thursday, March the 3rd. He died of COVID-19. That was in Maryland. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. He was 61 years old. He had been on the job for 32 years. He was the agency's lead drug recognition expert there. In addition, he had been assigned to the traffic unit and served as patrol operations deputy and a school resource officer. He is survived by his wife, 2 daughters, and a son. We have Correctional Officer V. Lonnie D. Johnson, Jr., Texas Department of Criminal Justice, Correctional Institutes Division, Texas. End of watch was Sunday, March the 6th. Cause of death was COVID-19. He was 67 years old. He had 8 years and 6 months on the job. He had served with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Division for 8.5 years. He is survived by his daughter. We have Corporal Benjamin Cooper of the Joplin Police Department in Missouri. He was 46 years old. He had been on the job for 19 years. Corporal Ben Cooper and Police Officer Jake Reed were shot and killed after responding to a disturbance call at a shopping center at 1:20 p.m. While they attempted to take a subject into custody, the man opened fire on them, critically wounding both. The man then stole one of their service weapons in a patrol car. He continued firing at pursuing officers until crashing near the intersection of East 9th Street and Connecticut Avenue. The man then took cover behind a van and opened fire on a third officer who was still inside his cruiser, severely wounding him. The man continued shooting at other responding officers until being fatally shot by return fire. Corporal Cooper was taken to the local hospital where he was pronounced dead a short time later. The other officer, we'll get to it. Corporal Cooper had served 19 years in law enforcement, beginning his career with the Joplin Police Department in 2003 and returning in 2016. He has served as a sheriff's deputy in Colorado between 2003 and 2016. He is survived by his wife and 2 daughters. Next, we have Police Officer Freddie Wilson from the Detroit Public Schools Community District Police Department in Michigan. End of watch was Thursday, March the 10th. He was 61 years old, 20 years on the job. Police Officer Freddie Wilson died after collapsing at the scene of a large fight near Henry Ford High School at about 3:30 p.m. Multiple officers have responded to the fight near the intersection of Vaughn Avenue and Trojan Street that involved a large number of subjects. Officer Wilson suddenly collapsed as they were dispersing the crowd. Other officers immediately rendered aid. He was transported to a local hospital where he passed away a short time later. Officer Wilson had served with the Detroit Public School Community District Police Department for 20 years in a heart attack. Don't say who he was survived by. Police Officer Jake Reed from the Joplin Police Department. End of watch was Friday, March the 11th. Cause of death was gunfire. Same story as we read for the other one. He was 27 years old. He had 5 years on the job. He is survived by his wife. He also donated his organs. So, another young man going way too soon. Police Officer Caleb D. Oglive, however you say the last name, Alex, I apologize now. Covington Division of Police, Virginia. End of watch was Monday, March the 14th. Cause of death was gunfire. He was 35 years old. He had 1 year on the job. Was also a military veteran. He was shot and killed while responding to a domestic disturbance call at a convenience store at about 4:47 p.m. The Covington Division of Police and Allegheny County Sheriff's Office, upon being alerted to the suspect's erratic behavior inside the store, immediately responded to the scene. As the officer and a county deputy arrived, the subject came out of the store armed with a pistol and opened fire on the officers. Officer Oglev and the subject were both fatally wounded during the subsequent exchange of gunfire. Once the scene was secured, it was discovered the suspect had shot and killed a male relative inside the store. The female relative was not injured. Both were employees of the business, married to one another, and related to the subject. Caleb was a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, had served with the police department for less than a year. He is survived by his wife and his 4 children. Deputy Sheriff Dominic Kalata, Pierce County Sheriff's Department in Washington. End of watch was March the 16th, 2020. Cause of death was gunfire. He was 35 years old, 6 years, 6 months on the job. He succumbed to gunshot wounds sustained the previous day while members of the County Sheriff's Department SWAT team attempted to serve an arrest warrant at the 19,000 block of Pacific Avenue. The SWAT team was assisting the South Sound Gang Task Force with serving the warrant. They were outside of the subject's mobile home when the man opened fire on them. Deputy Dominic and a sergeant were both shot and wounded before the subject was killed by return gunfire. Both deputies were transported to St. Joseph Medical Center, and Dominic succumbed to his wounds the following day and donated his organs on March the 16th. He was a U.S. Army veteran, a Washington National Guard veteran. He had served with the County Sheriff's Office for 6.5 years and was assigned to the contracted Edgewood Police Department. He is survived by his wife and 4-year-old child. Police Officer Lane Barnes, Bond Terry Police Department. End of watch was Thursday, March 17th, 2022. Cause of death, gunfire. The police department is in Missouri. He was 30 years old. He had 5 years on the job. He was shot and killed at about 12:30 a.m. as he and another officer responded to a disturbance at the Motel 6. As the officers were approaching the motel room, a man exited and immediately opened fire on them with a handgun. Despite being wounded, both officers were able to return fire and kill the subject. Officer Burns was transported to a local hospital where he succumbed to his wounds. His partner was flown to a trauma center in St. Louis to undergo surgery for the gunshot wound to his leg. Officer Burns had served with the police department for 5 years and had previously served with the St. Francisco County Sheriff's Office. He is survived by his 9-year-old daughter, 5-year-old son, and his fiance. Poor children now have to grow up without their father because of just dirtbag people. Sergeant Barbara Majors Finley, Eastland County Sheriff's Office, Texas. End of watch was Thursday, March the 17th. Cause of death was a fire. She was 51 years old, 19 years on the job. She was killed while trying to evacuate residents during the rapidly moving Eastland Complex fire. She was going door to door in the Carbon area in an attempt to notify citizens to leave the area when the area became inundated with smoke and low visibility. Her patrol car drove off the road and became engulfed in flames. The Eastland Complex fires had already burned over 45,000 acres at the time of her death. She had served with the county sheriff's office there for 9 years and had previously served with the Gorman Police Department for 10 years, including 6 years as the police chief. She is survived by her husband and her 3 children. Trooper Martin Francis Mack III, Pennsylvania State Police, Pennsylvania. End of watch Monday, March 21st, 2022. Cause of death was vehicular assault. He was 33 years old, 7 years, 6 months on the job, also a military veteran. We'll just do both together, and I'll jump right to it. Trooper Marty Mack and also Trooper Brandon Siska were struck and killed by a suspected drunk driver near mile marker 18 on southbound I-95 in Philadelphia. They had stopped a female driver for speeding and had interacted with her for less than 1 minute when they were notified of a pedestrian walking along the interstate. Due to their short interaction before being dispatched to the higher priority pedestrian call, the troopers had not observed any signs of impairment before giving her a warning. They then responded to the pedestrian call and located the man on the interstate. They were assisting him into the back of their patrol vehicle when an approaching car drove by and attempted to pass the police vehicle on the shoulder. The vehicle fatally struck both troopers and pedestrian they were assisting. The driver who struck them was charged with 3 counts of third-degree murder, 3 counts of homicide by vehicle while driving under the influence, and 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter of a law enforcement officer. She was the same driver that had been pulled over by the troopers several minutes earlier. Trooper Mack was a Pennsylvania National Guard veteran and had served with the Pennsylvania State Police for 7.5 years. He was assigned to Troop K and is survived by his wife and 2 children. Trooper Brandon T. Siska, who died along with his fellow trooper, was 29 years old. He had 1 year, 1 month on the job. He is survived by his wife, who is pregnant. Police officer Dan Rocha, which we spoke about him about a week ago or so. One of the listeners had sent the story in to us from that state. Police officers Dan Rocha from the Everett Police Department in Washington. End of watch was Friday, March 25th. Cause of death was gunfire. He was 41 years old, had 4 years on the job. He was shot and killed while investigating a suspicious person call at about 2:15 p.m. Citizens had called police to report the man's suspicious behavior. Officer Rocha made contact with the man and a struggle ensued, during which the man shot him in the head, killing him. The suspect then ran over Officer Rocha's body as he fled in a car. Other officers pursued the man for approximately 2 miles. He was taken into custody after crashing into several other vehicles at the intersection. Officer Rocha had served police officer in Everett Police Department for 4 years and had previously served as a parking enforcement officer. He's survived by his wife and his 2 children. Investigator Donald Crum's Houston County District Attorney's Office in Georgia. End of watch was Wednesday, March the 30th. Cause of death was automobile crash. He was 56 years old, 36 years on the job. Investigator Donald Crooms was killed in a vehicle crash on Moody Road near Willingham Drive around 12:30 p.m. An oncoming vehicle crossed the center line and struck the investigator's department vehicle head on. The collision caused the investigator Crooms' vehicle to strike a third vehicle traveling in the same direction. He had served at the Houston County District Attorney's Office for 2 years. He had served in law enforcement for 36 years. He had previously served with the Bibb County Sheriff's Office for 25 years, the Georgia Public Safety Training Center for 3 years, and the Middle Georgia University Police Department for 3 years. Don't say who he is survived by or anything. The extremely long career to be cut off like that, never getting to enjoy the fruits of his labor. We have police officer Dominic Francis of the Bluffton Police Department, Ohio. End of watch was Thursday, March the 31st, 2022. Cause of death was vehicle pursuit. He was 42 years old, 19 years on the job. Police officer Dominic Francis was struck and killed by a vehicle while deploying spike strips near mile marker 142 on I-75 at 2:30 a.m. Troopers with the Ohio State Police Highway Patrol had started pursuing the vehicle on State Road 15 after attempting to make a traffic stop. The vehicle fled and reached speeds exceeding 130 miles an hour before striking Officer Francis. The 3 occupants of the vehicle then fled the scene on foot. All 3 were taken into custody after about 10 hours. Officer Francis had served law enforcement for 19 years. He's survived by his wife, his son, and his daughter. We have Lieutenant William Lebo from the Lebanon City Police Department, Pennsylvania. Thursday, March 31st, 2022. Cause of death was gunfire. He was 63 years old, 40 years on the job. He was shot and killed as he and other officers responded to a domestic-related burglary. The owners of the house had returned home to discover that an emotionally disturbed relative had broken into the home and remained inside. The man was still inside when officers arrived on the scene. As a reaction team entered the home, the man opened fire with a handgun, striking Lieutenant Lebo and 2 other officers. Despite their wounds, the officers returned fire and shot the subject, who was later found deceased inside of the home. Lieutenant Lebo was transported to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. He had served 40 years at that police department and was scheduled to retire in 30 days on May 1st. He was scheduled to retire. I don't say if he was survived by anyone. That's just totally messed up. We have Deputy Sheriff Duran Almendarez from the Harris County Sheriff's Office in Texas. End of watch was Thursday, March 31st. Cause of death was gunfire. He was 51 years old and 23 years on the job. He was shot and killed while off duty when he interrupted 3 men attempting to steal a catalytic converter at 8:40 p.m. He and his wife were returning to their car in a grocery store parking lot when he observed the 3 men attempting to steal the catalytic converter. He instructed his wife to run from the scene before confronting the subject. A struggle ensued, and one of the men produced a handgun. During the struggle, a deputy pulled out his off-duty weapon and shots were exchanged in which he and 2 of the 3 suspects were wounded. The deputy was transported to the Houston Northwest Hospital where he succumbed to his wounds. The 2 wounded suspects drove themselves to the same hospital where they were taken into custody. The 3rd person was arrested a few days later. He had served with the Harris County Sheriff's Office for 23 years and was assigned to the Auto Theft Task Force. He survived by his wife. Over catalytic converters. This is going to be the last officer here. Police Officer Trey Marshall Sutton, the Henrico County Police Department in Virginia. End of watch is Thursday, March 31st, 2022. Cause of death was automobile crash. He was 24 years old. He'd only been on a job for 9 months. He was killed in a 3-vehicle crash when a truck drove into the intersection of Wilkinson Road and Chamberlain Road at 8:30 p.m. He and his field training officer were transporting a prisoner to the Henrico County Jail when their vehicle was struck by the truck and pushed into a 3rd vehicle. Officer Sutton, his field training officer, and the prisoner were all transported to the local hospital in life-threatening conditions. Officer Sutton succumbed to his injuries shortly after midnight. Officer Sutton had served with that police department for 9 months and had graduated from police academy in February 2022. He's survived by his parents and his fiance. Okay. We already do have one for this month already, unfortunately. Let's hope the numbers keep going down. They had 2 K-9 officers lost their lives this past month. We have K-9 Cicero from the Humphreys County Sheriff's Office in Tennessee. Thursday, March the 3rd, 2022 was the end of watch. Cause of death was fire. K-9 died after his handler's patrol car experienced an electrical failure that resulted in a fire igniting in the dashboard. The patrol car was parked at the county courthouse while the K-9's handler was attending court. A citizen alerted nearby deputies who suffered second-degree burn trying to rescue the dog. K-9 Cicero had served with the Sheriff's Office for 4 years and was a certified patrol and narcotics K-9. He was a male German Shepherd, 5 years old. We had K-9 Dash from the Shepherdsville Police Department in Kentucky. End of watch was March the 9th. Cause of death was gunfire. He was shot and killed while conducting a track of a robbery suspect in Lebanon Junction at about 9:30. Officers and deputies had responded to a robbery at a store on Preston Highway. As the first officers arrived, the suspect opened fire on them and fled on foot. K-9 Dash was brought to the scene and started a track of the suspect. As K-9 Dash and his handler turned a blind corner, the suspect opened fire on them, shooting Dash. Other officers returned fire and critically wounded the suspect. Dash was a Belgian Malinois, and he was a male. His age and how long he'd been on the job is not available. That was it from March. Still too many. Way too many from gunshots this past month. I mean, I didn't do the numbers, but I mean, that and vehicular accidents. Way too many. All I'm gonna say is keep them in your prayers. If you're a praying person, keep their families in your prayers, and just honor them You know, there's a lot of families out there hurting and stuff now. A lot of dads and moms not coming home that gave their life to protect people that they didn't know, and probably a lot of people don't even like us. They still give their lives for it. So they're the true heroes. So anyway, everybody stay safe out there. Watch your backs and watch your partner's backs.